Welcome, everybody, to Rad Turtle Wrestling Podcast, a hard-hitting, in-depth, cutting-edge look at today's product in the world of professional wrestling. Now, without further ado, here are your hosts, Rob Francois and Jeff Johnson. Hey guys, welcome back to the Rad Turtles Wrestling Podcast. I'm your host, Rob Francois. My co-host, Jeff Johnson, had a prior commitment this week, so he couldn't join us. But we have a very, very special guest. It's one of my bucket list people I want to talk to. Longtime former WWF, WWE, well, actually, it wasn't even WWE then by the time he left, but former employee of the WWF. He did the Event Center. He did the Coliseum home videotapes. He did commentary and primetime wrestling. You guys know who he is. It's Sean Mooney. How you doing, buddy?
I'm good. How you doing, Rad Rob?
I'm good, man. I'm very, very happy to talk to you. I'm glad you can give me some time today to chat. Very appreciative of that.
Oh, no worries. I appreciate being here.
Good. For my listeners that may not know who you are, because I do have a lot of younger listeners, when did you first get the call from the WWF to be to get you on part of their team?
Oh, wow. It was kind of an interesting situation, the way that all came about. I, at the time, was living in New York City working for Major League Baseball Productions, which was the production arm of MLB. And we produced television shows like This Week in Baseball and Greats of the Game, and did weekly, highlights for NBC and that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And they had started to branch out doing other programming. They wanted to, do some other things, more entertainment things. And they had started shows, like doing blooper shows. And it was kind of an experiment. They called it Light Moments in Sports. And it was hosted by Joe Namath. They were really fortunate to get Joe to come on board, and he would host these weekly shows with us. And I was actually a producer at the time. I was doing some talent things. I'd get in front of the camera whenever I could. But I had the chance to be one of the producers on the show. And also, whenever I got the chance to do anything, I'd go out and shoot a lot of the stuff in the field, because Joe would just show up and shoot the wraparounds. Right. And one of the stories, they needed a correspondent, because of course Joe couldn't go out there and ride camels and do stupid things like I did. And one of the stories they wanted to do was professional wrestling. They had a school called the Monster Factory, which is in New Jersey, still there. And Larry Sharp was the guy who ran it then. And so we set it up for us to go out there, and I was going to be the idiot who went there thinking he knew about wrestling and they were going to destroy him, basically. And I did. I went there and I shot this story for it. And Larry was really great. And I think that they appreciated the fact I wasn't there to make light of what they did. I was very respectful about it. And they literally just beat the crap out of me. But we had a lot of fun in it. It was a good story that it was included on the show, Light Moments in Sports. Well, it was syndicated, but through NBC stations. They put it around the country in some places. And somebody with the WWF saw it and thought, hey, that guy he seems like he has the personality, might be a good announcer or something for us.
Right. And
got the word to Vince. I guess he looked at it. And I knew a guy who had worked at MLB, who was working for them up in Stamford, which, is not far from New York City.
Right.
And he called me, he said, they're trying to find you. I said, find me for what? What are you talking about? He said, yeah, they're here at WWF. They saw you. And if you've got a resume tape together, you should get it up here. I'm like, oh, okay, sure. So I had been doing some things behind the scenes, and I put this tape together and sent it up there. And 2 weeks later, they called me for an audition. Now, I had about, a little time to prepare for it, but I didn't really know anything about professional wrestling. I grew up out in Arizona, where we didn't get a lot of wrestling organizations coming through there. I'd seen it, here and there, but I certainly couldn't describe me as a big fan. But I did a lot of homework. That was one thing I was very good at. I have done that throughout my career. And so I made sure I knew everything that was going on with the WWF. I knew the personalities. I got, pictures of them so I could recognize them. And I went up there and did this audition. I had no idea at the time how many people they were bringing in to audition. Mm-hmm. So I think that just because I was so naive, that I was kind of like, this is kind of a crazy shot, but I'm going to do everything I can. And I had an audition, as they always talk about, sell me the broom.
Yep.
That's the standard thing. And Bruce Pritchard was there, and So it was a standard thing. You read prompter, they throw some things at you, tell me the broom, whatever. But I had gone up there thinking, I got to do something different because they probably have people coming through there all the time, and they just do them what they tell them to do.
Right.
They just do what they tell them to do. So I came up with this really stupid skit on my own of thinking, okay, if they give me a chance, I'm going to just do this. And it was kind of this cut my own promo about people who won't admit to being professional wrestling fans. And it was just a couple minutes long. I'd kind of put together in my head. And before we wrapped it up, just to say, okay, thank you. And I said, hey, can I just do one more thing? It's just something I kind of put together in there. What? Yeah, sure. And so I did this. They didn't say anything after it was over or anything like that. But a few weeks later, I got a call from their HR guy. And he said that they want to come up and meet you. And they want you to come up and meet them. And I said, okay. So I took the train back up there, and long story even longer, they offered me a job.
Wow.
Vince, for some reason, thought that I might be able to do what they were looking for, and they brought me in. And it was just a chance, that why, take the chance when you got it. I mean, I knew how big it was. It was huge at the time when, it had been after WrestleMania and everything that happened with that. And Vince taking that huge shot, and it was. So I figured, like, what the hell? I'm not going to really ever get a chance through Major League Baseball. They had me do little things, but I didn't really see my career moving.
All right.
And so I took the chance. That's pretty much it.
That's pretty awesome. And I know that I've seen clips of Eric Bischoff when he went up there for an interview, and he did the whole sell the broom thing. And I mean, it was pretty bad. So obviously, he did nothing to stand out. But the fact that you came up with that little 2-minute little skit or segment, that stood out from everybody else. And that's essentially the reason they hired you, from what I can tell. So it's good that you were smart enough to do something like that instead of this the same old, because that's what got you noticed.
Well, and I always kept that, that attitude my entire career. That's how I ended up in New York. When I worked on a show called the Baseball Bunch out in Tucson. They shot it here with Johnny Bench. And so when the people from New York would come out, I bugged the crap out of them. Every time, they come into the set, and I'd have my little resume and just said, if anything's going on in New York, I'm available. Thinking, and that 2 weeks after those guys left, they called me up and said, if you can get out here, we'll give you a job. So I always tell people trying to get in the business or find a different path, find a different way.
Right. Yeah.
You don't have to be obnoxious. Persistent, I think, is a better word. Persistent. Be persistent.
I agree. Persistence is definitely key, and that's a lot of what we do with our show. Trying to get guests on. I mean, I explained to you off air. We're just an upstart podcast. We started a few months ago, but it's starting to take off. So we're messaging people. Like I messaged you. I messaged Jimmy Corderas. We had him on. Just you never know who's going to say yes, who's going to say no. You got nothing to lose. Just take a chance.
Yeah, I've been doing this for a year and a half, and that's exactly the way I'm doing it.
Right.
Guys that I thought, oh yeah, that'll be no problem. I'm still chasing. So
really, I wouldn't have thought of that. Everybody knows who you are.
Yeah.
So wow, that's good. That's good to know. That's
I was gonna say, don't feel like you're down there. I'm right there with you, trying to beg these guys to come on.
Right. Well, the good news is we have a deal that we just signed with Ring of Honor, and they have a big Supercard show coming up WrestleMania weekend in Madison Square Garden. So we're starting to line up, people from Ring of Honor and stuff like that, and we have some Impact stars lined up coming up. So it's interesting that there's so many different organizations, so many different indie. Wrestling's at a kind of another boom right now. I know it's cyclical, and there's down times and there's boom times. But right now it seems to be with AEW. With the indie scene, things are starting to turn around again.
Yeah, and it's fun to see. You hear me talk about it all the time, but I really like seeing what's happening right now with these organizations, especially now at a level that AEW appears to be at this time. And the buzz that surrounding that organization is incredible. To think that they could sell 11,600 plus tickets in, I think, 6 minutes this time, and had thousands and thousands waiting to try and get them is pretty incredible. And it's not to say that the WWE is shaking in their boots but they have definitely taken notice. And the fact that they're not allowing people to come into their arenas with AEW gear on, and lets you know that they're taking them seriously. The interesting part of it all is to see what's going to happen as far as what that organization does. We'll see if they can keep it the way they have it, and the way it appears to me, and what I saw when I was at All In last year and at StarCast, is that it really is a group of people who have taken their own destinies, in their hands. So they've decided that they're not going to let big giant corporate America control what they do, and they have an opportunity here now. Let's hope they don't become big corporate America, and if they could keep it to that point. I tell the story at StarCast when they were about to go out for the big press conference and the weigh-in. I think that's had set it up at StarCast. And I just remember, Cody got up on a chair. Everybody's in this green room, and he just got up in a chair, and it was just so much fun. They're just having a good time, and everybody has a say. And that atmosphere, if they can keep it that way, it's going to be a really fun organization to watch. Business has a way of changing people. We'll see what happens. But if they can keep it that way, and that these people feel that they are really deciding their own futures, the fact that they control their merchandise, they can go in between, they can go to other organizations and work, which is kind of like that old territory system.
Absolutely.
It's going to be great to see, and who knows that they will ever, if they're ever going to be really on a competitive ground with the WWE. But it is giving the boys and the women, giving them an opportunity, to have other choices here, and we'll see what happens. But it's great to see it. I think that it's much needed in the world of professional wrestling right now.
I agree, and you bring up a good point. It's good to have the guys and the ladies, have another place to work. I mean, essentially, since WCW got bought out, that took a major part away from where they can go. And it's amazing what AEW has been able to achieve just on internet buzz alone. That's the beauty of the internet and social media nowadays. You didn't have that back in the day. Nowadays they've essentially only put on one show, which was All In, but so many people are into it. So many people are excited for it. Everybody thinks it's going to be another, Monday, Tuesday Night War thing, and maybe they're going to compete, which I hope they do, because as you know, competition is great for everybody. If you don't have a competition, you get complacent, which I think the current product that WWE has gotten in the last few years is they've gotten complacent because they know they're the number one game. They know they're worldwide. Nobody can touch them. And I don't think anybody will ever be able to overtake them. But the fact that, like you said, they are paying attention, who knows? I mean, if AEW has a decent TV contract, which I assume they do, I don't think they ever would have signed Chris Jericho if he didn't know what they had in the works.
Yeah.
But if they can get that major TV deal and get proper promotion, the sky's the limit for those guys.
Right, but you just nailed it, though, as far as that's what it all comes down to. There's a lot of money behind it right now because of the backers that they have.
Yeah. But
at the same time, if they need it all comes down to a TV deal. That's what works now. That's the way it happens. That despite how many people you can put into an arena, you've got to have that exposure.
Yeah. And
if they ever are going to get to a level with the WWE, then that's going to be the big difference. Now, they've got to get on a major network to do that, something along the lines of the USA Network or something. But they've got to have regularly scheduled programming. They have to be able to, and then it becomes a ratings race, and that's where it's all going to come down to. So we'll see what happens. But you mentioned social media. That's another great point of this, is that, all these people like Marty Scurll and Nick Aldis and Cody and the Young Bucks, man, do those guys understand what the power of social media, and that is how they built this.
Yep.
Is that and that's what's awesome about social media and the connections that these guys can make, because everybody feels like they know these guys.
Right.
And that's why they'll get just as many people to go watch their matches as they'll get them to watch to go and want to see a Marty Scurll sing along. It's because they feel like they know these guys, and that's a big, powerful part of what's happening with AEW. Right. And I don't think that people feel that same way, even though, of course, the WWE guys are all have Twitter and are on, but it's a grassroots feeling to it. That with these AEW, these guys say these are our guys. They're and that's a very, very powerful part of why they're being successful right now.
Yeah, they're so smart. But Cody and the Bucks absolutely know what they're doing, and you're right. It is more of a grassroots thing, and the whole social media thing plays probably the biggest part in all of it. Do you watch the current product as far as WWE at all?
Not on a regular basis. I don't. I host a morning show out here, and I go to bed very early. Gotcha. So I really don't have a chance. But what I do is, I will record some of it because I like seeing how this is all going down now. I mean, it's as we talked about, we will see, but I'm trying to, at least from my viewpoint, I'm just like, what is it that's missing? What's the part? Why can't they make this happen? And it's not like the WWE isn't incredibly successful right now. I mean, they're still making tons of money, but a lot of that has to do with these worldwide deals they have, and people will take the content. They just love it. They eat it up. But here is where, as far as whether or not it's working, is where you see it's the product that's going out there now, and you see what they're doing. They're bringing people back. They have these, guys that show up, Jeff Jarrett and Road Dogg, and and so it's always been in the past when they did that. It's because the current product is not getting it done. Right. So that you mentioned competition. That bar is getting raised. So it's lit a fire. And I think I expect to see the product improve over the next years. As they go into this fight, we'll see what happens. But Bruce Pritchard's back. So who would have ever thought that would happen?
Yeah, I mean, even Bruce probably didn't think that was going to happen.
No, yeah, unfinished business.
Yeah, but you can tell just from watching the last few weeks that since Bruce has been back, you can see his fingerprints all over the shows. They've instantly gotten better, and you can pretty much tell if he's producing, segments again like he used to. You can pretty much tell what he's involved in because they're the best parts of the show. So I give Bruce a lot of credit for what he does. He's a very smart guy, and he's an excellent mind for the business.
Well, and one of the big pieces of that connection that worked then was Pat Patterson. Right. I mean, Pat was really the huge part of that creative force, and he's not really as active anymore, and I don't think he has any interest of doing that. So I'm interested to see. Well, that was kind of this triangle. It was Pat, Bruce, and Vince, and they both knew how to deal with Vince. They knew how to make that. Well, they knew how to make the creative machine work. Yeah. He'd have a big idea. Pat would mold it. Bruce would put in his 2 cents, and they came out with this great product, this great idea. Yeah. It'll be interesting to see now. I don't know who else is involved, but just the fact that Bruce is now back with Vince, what's going to happen?
Yeah, I'm excited for it. I think Jeff Jarrett is a great addition as well. Jeff grew up in the business. I mean, Jeff knows the business inside and out. It's in his blood. So, hopefully he does well. Hurricane Helms is there now. I mean, he's very, very good. He's a student of the game too.
Well, we'll see. We'll see what happens with. Of course, they can't recapture the exact talent, right? But I'm interested to see it. Will they go back to what worked then, and will it work today? Can you have an announcer like Gene, Gene Okerlund, who gets actively involved, with pushing storylines, and as we used to do, we were very much involved in, how these guys cut their promos. Now, instead of just putting the mic out there, to see if that's going to happen. Will the storylines go back? Will they start trying to do longer periods of time when they're pushing a storyline? Whereas instead of the 2 weeks or whatever, because we have so many pay-per-views, maybe
Right.
they'll keep it going through more than one pay-per-view. I don't know, but it's going to be interesting to see what they do to try and right the ship.
Right, and that's a great point you brought up, and that's actually something I wanted to speak with you about. With the way younger fans are nowadays, and the way social media is, and everyone has a cell phone, it's so much information at your fingertips. It's all about instant gratification. I don't feel like, and this isn't a knock on people, I just feel like it's just the way our society is now. I don't think you can have that slow build or slow burn anymore, to try to heat somebody up over 5-6 months. It's unfortunate the attention spans just aren't that long now, and I don't know if that old school kind of approaching to booking would even play well nowadays. I don't know how you feel about that, but
Well, the question is, which came first?
right, yeah.
I'm saying, did they start shortening the storylines because of the added pay-per-views, and everyone had to be spectacular with a new,
True.
end to a story, some climax to it, or was it something that they felt the audience wanted?
Right.
And so
That's a good point.
I think that you have to be confident in what your creative is.
Mm-hmm.
That where if you're always just saying, did they like that? Okay, let's do that. I mean,
Right.
I've worked in news, and I remember one of my stops along the way, the news director, because the ability to run down a newscast, you could do it to the second, and these guys would watch every quarter of this. Oh, it spiked there. Well, what story did we do? Okay,
Right.
let's do another story on that. And then the next night it wouldn't do as well. Well, because they saw that story and you just tried to, it's like watching a sequel.
Right.
You know what I mean? So if
Yeah.
you're reacting to every single thing that happens with that, and you're dependent, and I'm not to say you don't listen to your audience. I'm just,
Right.
my point is, you have to be confident with your creative,
Mm-hmm.
because otherwise a lot of times the audience doesn't know, they don't know what they want.
Okay. Yeah, you're right.
They just want to be entertained. Entertain me. That's what you do. That's why I watch your show.
Right.
Not, what do you want? We'll give it to you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, that's a really good point. And it's hard for me because obviously it's not a different product from what I grew up with, and when it was, when I was growing up as a kid, that's when you were involved. It was the mid to late 80s, early 90s, and it was just a different way of telling stories back then. Like you said, you had Bruce and Pat and Vince, sitting by the pool booking for the next year.
Yeah.
Well, there's times now I've heard that, Vince may be rewriting the show at the last minute. I mean, that's just a completely different way that they do business now, and I'm not sure what was the cause of that or how that started.
Yeah, that's I have no idea how it works today. I only
Right.
see what ends up on the screen. But you're right, and I mentioned this today during the Q&A that I had for our Patreon members, Primetime with Sean Mooney, is the fact that they were able to build storylines that were months and months in the making, and then months and months beyond. They could go to a pay-per-view with a buildup for months and months, and people just couldn't wait,
Mm-hmm.
and they would deliver the climax to that storyline. But in the meantime, they'd had another layer coming in, that something that would come off of that, and that was just great storytelling. I mean, the fact that you were able to just keep putting out those breadcrumbs, as I call it,
Right.
and being able to do that, and then not only finish whatever that main storyline was, but in the meantime something else spins off of that. Mm-hmm. Involving, say, one of the talents or both of the talents teaming up together, or and a
Right.
new arch nemesis, a new nemesis comes in,
Yep.
and that was just great storytelling.
It was.
And you don't see that today. And like I said, I am not there. I don't know how it comes together.
Right.
I just look at it because to me everything's about entertainment, and whether it's because things have to move along too quickly, they think that fans can't take an extended storyline. I don't know. I just tell you, all I can tell you is from what I see, and that's and what I experienced back then.
I don't know how much NXT you watch, but you can easily tell the difference between a Kevin Dunn production and, say, a Triple H and whoever he has running his production crew. Two different types of presentations where, all of last year they had Johnny Gargano and Tommaso Ciampa in a year-long feud, and it was some of the best stuff we'd ever seen. I mean, it's stuff with some of the best stuff we've seen in a long, long time.
Well, see, there you go. I mean, because that kind of makes it clear that maybe fans they can handle an extended story, an extended storyline, but it also takes those characters.
Right.
I mean, you could have taken, if you would have thrown two other people and let's say make them Rock and make them Stone Cold. Well, that might have fizzled out because those two didn't have that presence, that charisma, that
chemistry.
That Dwayne Johnson, or Steve Austin. That's the difference. You need the people that do it have to be able to pull it off.
Right. And that's not a knock on Kevin Dunn or anybody that they have in WWE. I mean, nobody knows the product inside and out better than Kevin and Vince and their crew. But it's just funny that, they're two different brands under the same umbrella, but yet two absolutely completely different presentations.
Yeah. Well, and what else is great that I wonder, because like I said, I'm not there. I don't understand. I don't know what goes on behind the scenes and the difference between the two brands and how that comes down.
Right.
But my feeling is that from seeing it from the outside is that the NXT guys are given a little more freedom, or given maybe a lot more freedom to develop their characters.
Right. Yeah.
And that's what worked in the 80s and 90s. If you would have put, someone like Hacksaw Jim Duggan or, anybody that were very successful back then, cutting promos. And if you handed them a sheet of paper and said, okay, here's your promo, go in the booth, go in the cube and do it.
Yeah.
And it would have been horrible.
Right.
Even if, no matter how good they were at memorizing, those guys, when they went in there, they had a storyline in their head. They knew that character. They lived that character. You saw them in the airport.
Yep.
Good chances you saw Randy Savage in spandex and a cowboy hat.
Right.
Cowboy boots. That's the way he traveled, or or Zubaz or something. I mean, they were that was him. If you saw him, you didn't say I just saw Randy Poffo. I just saw the Macho Man.
Right.
Because that was their character. They lived that. And maybe, like I said, I'm not there, but my feeling is that those guys are given a little more freedom to develop. And I think, and I would hope, I don't understand why that message wouldn't carry forward.
Right.
When they do get called up, why it's like anything else. When, let's say you got a great show, you've got this great podcast, and suddenly Westwood One calls you and said, we want you to be part of the network.
Right.
Oh, that's fantastic. But there's a couple of changes we want you to make. Now, we're going to script the podcast for you from now on, just so we get things we want in there. We'll give you a section of the show where you can actually just riff and talk about what you want. But here's what we want you to do. Well, your show was very successful before you got, now you get there and they change it. And you see that happen. And why didn't it work? Why didn't it work? Well, because you didn't let them do the same thing they were doing before that people loved.
Right.
And it's like the old network story, right? The show, you got this great show, and then they becomes, crazy famous. People want to see it, and they go, but we're going to make a few changes.
Yeah.
They can't figure out why it gets canceled, 3 months later because nobody's watching it.
That's a fantastic point. Like, if you try to script Roddy Piper, back in the
man, I mean, Bret Hart,
happen.
you would have done that back then. Really, I mean, imagine that would have just not worked. Right. I mean, Hulk would come in, and I remember him talking about one time, one of the conversations that somebody had asked him, and I don't know if it was a younger wrestler or whatever, but says, why do you come up with your promos? And he said, well, basically, never specifically talk about wrestling was kind of his message. I don't know the exact words, but if you ever look at it, and it might be something, let's say that we're out in California and he was down at Venice Beach that day. Yeah. Well, that promo might be, I was down hanging and banging, with the guys pumping the metal on the beach, and they were talking, and I was backstroking in the Pacific Ocean, and people, it's just like, wow, he's telling the story here, but he's getting back to who he's going to, take out tonight,
right?
And he, then I was backstroking in the Pacific Ocean, I was thinking about the earthquake, and how this, and I'm going to create a tsunami to, And he just wove it all together. But nobody had that guy a script. Nobody said, "Here, I came up with this last night, Hulk. Why don't you say this today?" He would have probably tossed the guy out of his ear into the hallway.
Right.
So, and it wasn't. They weren't always great, but that's why it worked.
Right.
That's why it worked.
Yeah, especially when you get somebody like, Ultimate Warrior, who nobody even knew. I don't even know if he knew what he was talking about.
No,
but,
to this day. There are websites devoted to try and figure that out, and no one has done it.
Right, it's some ancient language.
Right, but it didn't matter.
It did not matter. Right.
No, it didn't. But it's the same thing that with those interviews. I think why our interviews worked well when Gene and I did them, because we didn't know what they were going to say. Those reactions that we had were real. I mean, we just like, what the heck, or wow, and that was genuine. Right. So, that it was rare that they were structured that tightly. And for example, if you look at the ones from Saturday Night's Main Event, those were pretty scripted.
Right.
And I always thought that they were different than ones you see for pay-per-views, and so you couldn't do that today. And I think that why not? Why the hell not do that today? Give it a shot. See what happens. It might just take the WWE to a whole new place.
But I agree.
Because, they're not calling me. So.
Right. I mean, you can honestly tell, Sean, that there's certain guys that you can tell if you look at them that they're trying to remember what they're trying to remember what was written for them, and it seems forced. It seems like they're trying to remember lines. Like you said, they know their character better than anybody else. They're the ones that live it every day. It's whether it's their gimmick or not. Usually the best people are like Stone Cold or like Ric Flair, that just take their normal character and crank the volume up to 11. And being in such a heavily scripted environment now, you're not going to get spontaneity like that. You're not going to get your Ric Flair saying these shoes cost more than your house, pal. Just ad-libbing on the spot. Like, that's how great Rick was, and Hulk and Macho Man was a great interview. Brett, Shawn Michaels. Undertaker. They knew their gimmick. Can you imagine somebody else trying to do Undertaker's gimmick? Like, he knew what he wanted. He lived it every day. There's back in the day, good guys wouldn't even travel with bad guys. It was a completely different game than it is now. But I do want to go back to what you said about the interviews backstage with you and Gene. It must have made you feel good that they gave you the confidence to go at a WrestleMania, because we know how great Gene was. But it must have made you feel good that they had enough confidence to put in you that you can go out there and do backstage interviews on live TV or even the pre-tapes. But they had enough confidence in you to know that you're going to get the job done.
Yeah, and that really did make me feel good. I've talked before about the influence that Gene had on me. That was tremendous. Mm-hmm. But from the very beginning, it wasn't. I never thought I want to be Gene Okerlund, and I just took his the way his timing and how he would react, and just the rapport that he had with the guys, that I tried to get to that point as well, and I just tried to adopt it in my way, but there were so many things I took from him. It wasn't necessarily imitation. It was just technique and how he did things. And I first going in, if you look at those interviews I first did, I was not great at it. But I think that, I got to the point where, I really felt that I helped put those guys over. Whenever I was in there, I did my job. I stayed out of the way. I knew when to come in, when not to, and a lot of that was from Gene. Gene was the master. I said it once, I'll say it to my grave, that there's Gene Okerlund, and then there were the rest of us.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that there's nobody will ever be like him. Nobody ever has been like him, and he just was amazing. Just an incredible talent.
He was.
And just there's so many things that he did, and nobody could ever match it.
How cool was he to hang out with outside of work?
He was a blast.
Yeah,
he was awesome. Many a night. And I didn't, and people ask me all the time, did you, party with the guys, party with the boys? Did you go out? And no, I didn't. That was, to me, I learned a few things early on from people like Gorilla Monsoon and Alfred Hayes, who told me, and I've said it before, that the one mistake you can make is to ever think you're one of them. That you're not. And I understood that very early on. I worked really hard to become accepted. Mm-hmm. I'll say, I'll use that word, become accepted, become part of that family. But there wasn't a day that I thought, hey, I'm like one of them. Hey guys, that wasn't. And I felt that was important, first of all, to have that relationship, because when we did step into, an interview room, it wasn't like, hey, okay, let's go. And Gene could do that because Gene, that was for real. I mean, Gene, that's where he came from. And he, how to separate the two. But I didn't. I got invited many times to go to rooms where they were having parties, and we all stayed at the same hotel. I'd go down for a drink, say hi to everybody, and then I was out. And that, to me, having my job was really important. And I only thought only bad things could come out of doing that. I mean, really.
Yeah,
There could be 1,000 nights and 1,001st that something really went bad, and I wasn't going to be able to do this anymore.
Right.
And so my point being is that there was very few that I did have trust in that relation, that kind of relationship. And Gene was one of them. We spent many a night having some Okerlunds here and there. And he was a great mentor and just so damn funny. Yeah. And I probably heard his jokes 1,000 times. He had a Rolodex, and I fell on the floor every time. And he was just his timing, the way he would say stuff, just nobody could match. That's just the way he was. I mean, how he, somebody would come up to him and say, hey, do you know Sean Mooney? Oh, that tremendous announcer for the WWF, about 6 feet tall, really knows how to talk to the ladies. Never heard of him. Then he'd say, never heard of him. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
and
awesome.
but I mean, he just, and I don't know how many times I heard him say that. It could be just a different name, but God, it was just so damn funny the way he said it, and just to hear people's reaction,
Yep.
And there's so many other stories I could, I wouldn't tell, but he, he was awesome. But there are people, Alfred, I spent a lot of time with. Gorilla Monsoon was fantastic to me, and so and Bobby as well, Bobby Heenan.
Yeah.
But besides that, I just knew it was better that I didn't. And I had friends. There's no question about it. I had a lot of superstars I was friends with, but I never crossed that line. I was never said I was one of them. I just knew better.
I got you. I have several questions to spin off of that, but it isn't a strange business that, the way, and it's completely different now, the way they do business, but back then, wrestling business was very, very strange. When did they actually smarten you up, or did anybody ever smarten you up?
Oh yeah, they had to. I mean, early on, they put me in front of a camera, and they didn't want me saying that I shouldn't.
Right.
But not so much smartening up, but being allowed in. When I first got there, I'd walk into the locker room, and the sudden chill would come over the area, and they'd suddenly start speaking Carney.
I was going to ask you if they did that. If they came.
Okay. It was very clear. And at that time, this is when Vince was bringing in a lot of people from the outside world, not just performers. Maybe that was kind of few and far between, but at the same time. But he would bring athletes in and do that. But as far as behind the scenes, Vince realized that if he was going to raise the level of his product, he had to increase the quality of it.
Right.
It couldn't be old darkened studio lighting with a ring, and he started bringing people that had network level experience. Mm-hmm. We had a lot of people that worked in the production facility that came from the networks that worked for NBC and all sports networks, and so. But it was a time when you still had very much old school people that as far as the wrestlers were old generation guys. They'd come up, even people like Brett and Greg Valentine and all these guys. Their fathers were wrestlers. They'd been in the business forever, and so these two worlds were colliding, and they didn't trust people. And so I fell into that group. I was this guy, who the hell came out, where's he from?
Yeah.
And it took me a good year. I'll say a good year. And I just did what, Gorilla and Alfred told me, and a few others, Gene, about, there may things happen, maybe ribs, but just roll with them and just keep going, keep your head down, do what they tell you to do, and you'll be fine. And it took about a year, but after about that, then it just started, loosening up. Guys would talk to me. We would, and it just got better and better. But it was not easy. You didn't take your shoes off on a plane. You didn't fall asleep on a plane.
Right.
You didn't, like I said, you didn't go to the after hours gatherings, that kind of thing. But it took a while. It was not easy to get in.
You mentioned Alfred Hayes. Can you think of any announcer or a person that's more underrated than Alfred? I mean, he was fantastic at everything he did.
Yeah, and I still have a slow burn over the fact that he was let into the Hall of Fame as legacy, basically.
Yeah.
And he should have had a full induction, as far as I'm concerned, because not only his contribution to the business as a wrestler. I mean, a lot of people don't realize that he had a tremendous career in the ring and was a phenomenal heel. If you've ever had an opportunity to hear some of his promos, he was tremendous. He was a much better heel than he was a babyface.
Yeah, he's fantastic.
And then he came in at the ground level with Vince. I mean, he was working in the office. And then, of course, was part of the shows that they did, and Tuesday Night Titans, and was the sidekick there, and did everything that Vince ever wanted him to do. And whether it was be the buffoon or announcing, he used to drive down to Philadelphia. He used to drive to Philadelphia. We would do the garden shows, MSG and Boston every month, but Alfred would also go down and do Philly. He just liked to do it. And he just did so much. So to me, it baffles me. It really does.
Yeah.
And the fact that it was kind of like, well, we'll just bring him in as, legacy, and he's in. And now everybody will stop talking about it or something like that.
Right.
I don't understand it. I really don't. And he left after I did. I don't know what transpired, but I can't imagine that happened. I just don't understand why it didn't. He should have had a full induction.
I mean, plenty of people have had falling outs with Vince and have been welcomed back. You're right. It boggles my mind too, that everything that he did. I mean, he was so good. His timing was impeccable too, and he wasn't a bad color commentator either. And to give credit to you too, you weren't a bad play-by-play announcer. I've been watching some prime times from '89 where you and Alfred would do commentary together. I thought you guys had fantastic chemistry. You're underrated as a play-by-play guy for not being a wrestling guy. I thought you guys worked well together.
Well, thank you for saying that. Really, that means a lot, because I thought, initially, admittedly, I had a lot to learn.
Right.
But one thing that, and as I've said, I've always been a great student as far as, I know that there's a lot of things I don't know. And I can always learn. I still do it to this day. And I studied those guys. I watched Jesse. I watched Vince. Yeah. I watched Bobby. I watched Gorilla, Alfred. And I just took it in. And I got better and better. I developed my own style, I felt. And I thought Alfred and I were excellent together. I really did. And I never understood it that Vince didn't like us together. He didn't thought, Really? And and so we were kind of relegated to do all of the Coliseum matches, which don't get me wrong, I know those were really important, but and we did we'd go to house shows, we would do the Garden, and I got to do play-by-play there, and which was great because that gave me a lot of experience. But I was disappointed that we never really got that shot to be at least a C team, or something. We could fill in on shows.
Right.
But from what I understand, Vince didn't really like what we did, so I don't know. I've gotten heat over the years. Initially, people would say, yeah, you're terrible play-by-play. But I think that if people really went back, we weren't that bad. I thought we were a pretty good team.
I thought you were, and I'm not just blowing smoke up your ass. I mean, I've been a fan for 30 plus years. I've seen them all, I've heard them all. I thought you guys were good. I mean, it's all subjective. I don't know what Vince saw or didn't see, but as a fan, I thought you guys are great. I enjoyed your stuff that you did on with Alfred. I thought you had very, very good chemistry together.
Yeah, well,
it is what it is, right?
Yeah, I was going to say it is what it is, and we did thousands of matches together. My God, and that was what was fun about it, is that we did these matches that at the time nobody cared about, really. They didn't really know what Coliseum Video was going to do.
Right.
So if you listen to some of those play-by-play, we had fun. I thought we played off each other. I'd come in with a whole premise about Alfred in the rental car. We were never at these places. We were in a booth in Stanford recording these one after another. But I would make up an entire premise of, we barely made it. Thank you very much, Alfred. You insisted on getting a Rolls Royce. They don't rent, something like that. And we would just go off. And that's, and a lot of those Coliseum Video, the early on cameras were totally just ad-libbed. We would go out there, and we had a big giant prop closet at Stanford at Hamilton before it's been reconfigured. But they had this gigantic, I remember it had big green doors that were 20 feet high. And we would go into this prop closet that were leftover stuff that they'd had from gimmicks or shoots that they did, vignettes. And we'd just go shopping. We didn't really know what we were going to do that day. Oh, we'd say, hey, look at all this. They just did some kind of a Navy theme thing. And, so Alfred would put on the captain's thing or the, Admiral stuff and whatever it was. And we would, Kevin Granith was a producer at the time. And we would tell him, man, we found this stuff. When we do it, we'll do a naval theme or something. And, and that's the early stuff before it started really selling. And then it got more, elaborate. And we did stuff like the Star Trek episode.
I remember that. Yeah.
So we had a blast. And part of that was because they didn't really notice what the hell we were doing. And I remember, I remember it was, and the other thing that's funny is that we were doing all these crazy things. Mm-hmm. And I think at one point Vince saw one of them and just went off like, what the hell are they doing? And they said, Vince wants you guys to tone it down. But shortly after that, everybody was doing that stuff.
Right.
It was brought in as a regular part of what they did there. And we didn't get the credit that we deserved because we were on our own and we were just having a blast.
You guys were innovators.
Yeah, we were just having fun.
Right.
Alfred had a great sense of humor, and we would just, we did it. We just had a good time. I miss him.
And I know it's unfortunate guys like him and Bobby and Gorilla and Gene are no longer here because they're the last of a dying breed. Honestly, there's nobody else like them nowadays, and I don't know if there ever will be. I mean, there's plenty of talented people, but man, they were just cut from a different cloth back then.
Yeah. Yeah, and a lot of thing with those guys. One of the big things I feel with those guys is that, they came from the road. They miles and miles and miles of in different venues and different people that they interacted with, and they just had all that experience behind them that they brought to in front of that camera. And not to knock, I'm not knocking the talent that they have, the announcers today. But I just don't think that they're given the freedom to really develop. I mean, they're basically said, okay, just say these 2 words and then give them the mic. Well, how are you supposed to, the idea is they don't want that person to become, a more recognized personality than the one guy they're talking to. I don't know.
I don't know.
But that adds to your content. I mean, that to me, that's part of it. They certainly don't have to, you never want them to overshadow the talent, but they can certainly be, identifiable and popular. And what's wrong with that? And they do bring something to the show. And I know that, I remember having the conversation with Nick Aldis saying that, he'd love to have that type of situation because it helps the talent, because that person helps bring them along, can help with the train of thought, or they whatever they've got going, can ask them a question that they can kind of plant to them so they're prepared, so it doesn't look like it's like any other conversation. If you want to talk about something, well, if you bring it up, it doesn't sound right, but if somebody feeds you it works. And that's important. That's part of it. So it's a lost art in a sense, but I think there are really talented people that they have. They just aren't given the opportunity to really show what they can do.
I agree. I
Yeah.
agree. It's definitely a different game now, and I feel like
Yeah.
any of the backstage interviews they have now, you have the, whether it's the female or the male, whoever it is now, asking them questions. It's questions that Vince wanted them to ask, and it's nothing organic. It's
Yeah.
just it's a very controlled environment now. It's just it's a different game, but
Yeah, you look at people like Charlie Caruso, who I did a video with back there, and she's very talented, and we had a lot of fun, and I could tell she'd be great to work with. I'd love to work with her because she can banter, she can go,
yeah.
but I don't know how many people have really gotten the chance to see that with her because of it is like that.
Yeah.
She does some of these other things with the host of the backstage stuff, the shows and like that. And they do give some freedom, but I think that she could do a lot more. Same with Corey. Corey Graves, I think, is very talented.
Corey's fantastic. He's kind of a throwback guy. He gets it. He totally gets it.
Yeah, but I think with like those announcers of those shows, man, it's you're worried more about what am I plugging? What do I got to get to? What do I then just let's call the match?
Yeah.
And whether that's just the way it is these days because of the way the corporate machine works. I mean, they've got to keep their advertisers happy, and but back then we didn't have that, and so you were able to hear Bobby go off and do the stuff that he did, talking about his talent, and nobody was telling him what to say. There was nobody in a headset talking in his ear.
I was gonna say I highly doubt Vince was giving Gorilla or Bobby or Jesse or any of them any instructions. Yeah.
Oh no, it didn't happen. So it's very different. But there are talented folks there. I hope they're given the chance to show just how talented they are.
Hopefully so. In your mind, do you think Gorilla and Bobby were the best at what they did?
Yes.
I think that's
people have asked me that a lot.
Yeah.
And I think all-time best teams, yes. The way they grew together, and and that genuine affection for each other shined through, and they were like a well-timed comedy team.
Oh yeah.
They really were. The way they could play off of each other, and there was always what worked so well to them is that if you put Bobby with somebody, say, in stature that was along the lines, it wouldn't have worked as well. You know what I'm saying? But then you had Gorilla Monsoon, who could swat him like a fly whenever he got out of hand, right?
Right.
And so he would take it, and finally he'd say he'd have enough, and he'd say, all right, that's enough, Bobby, or he didn't, and Bobby would do his back down. He'd be the bravado, and then suddenly he would be deflated.
He would,
and that was like a big part of it. You could break down why comedy teams work. That there is a science to it in a sense. And besides, Bobby being just genuinely funny and situationally funny.
Yeah.
Really, I mean, I traveled with a guy enough where he could anything. Something would happen and he'd have a line. He was the way his mind worked, and it was so damn funny. It just came out of nowhere. But he needed someone to pitch.
Right.
He needed a pitcher, and Gorilla was that guy, and knew exactly how to do it, and then keep it going and take it, and that was just magic. That doesn't just happen. Those two somehow were put together because they had teamed with many other people before that. Gorilla was with Jesse a lot, and we saw but when they got together, it was great because Gino could legitimately call the action when they needed to, and Bobby could put over whatever he put over the heels by siding with them, and put over the babies by saying how absurd they were and what how can people like these guys? Well, he's putting them over every frickin' second, and it was just awesome. And when I think about the teams I never liked Vince's play-by-play. It's just a personal thing. I didn't like. I think he never took it to it. It was always at 9, it's 10. Always just. but
Yeah.
on the other hand, though, I thought that Vince and Jesse were great together. I thought that was a great team. It did. It worked. So, but all time, nobody to me touches Bobby and Gorilla. I thought that they were just, whatever they were doing together. The set of prime time, out on location together. They were just, it was magic.
It was magic, and they were meant to be put together.
Yeah.
It was just yeah, exactly. And you're right about Vince and Jesse. Vince and Jesse were great together, but Vince and other people not so great, because you're right. It's his product. He's very passionate. There's no more, nobody's more passionate about the product than he is, because he owns it. And you're right. He was at a 9 and a 10 pretty much all the time. But for whatever reason, him and Jesse worked well together. And it was good stuff.
Well, maybe it was just the two personalities. They collided, and for that reason it worked, because bottom line, Jesse defied him every
pretty much. Yeah,
second he worked for him.
Yeah, he did.
But they respected each other, and but there was Jesse. Nobody's going to tell him what to do, and for that reason it worked.
It did. You're right.
And like he was just.
Yeah. And that's stuff they did on Superstars and Saturday Night's Main Event was really, really good. That's some of my favorite stuff.
Yeah.
Jesse wouldn't take any crap from Vince at all. And, nobody really, I mean, some people knew back then Vince was the boss, but it wasn't, the internet wasn't around, so it wasn't a big, wide known thing. But the fact that Jesse got away with half the stuff he got away with the boss shows you a lot about their relationship.
Yeah. Yeah. No, but that worked.
Yeah.
It was another combination. Just wasn't my all time, because Bobby and Gino were it.
Yeah, I agree. When you were doing your Coliseum stuff, Tony Schiavone was there for a year in '89, and he did some work for them. Did you guys work together on any projects when you're doing the videos?
Yeah, Tony was actually one of the producers. He produced a bunch of those Coliseum videos, and and then we did do some projects together. We hosted Primetime one time, I think we did, and
one time it was the week after WrestleMania. I do remember that.
Yeah, they put us out there.
Yeah.
But I really liked Tony. We back then somebody told me it was, when I found out it was a year, and I was thinking, geez, really? That was it?
It seemed like a lot longer, didn't it?
It did. I just felt he was a big part of it then, and he talks about it as one of his biggest regrets, not sticking around. To me, that's a regret too. I think that he would have done really well, and I totally understand it. He was, had lived in this part of the country forever, and then Stanford's not an easy place to live. It isn't, and I came from New York City, so nothing to me. That was awesome. I had a car. Wow. I lived in a shoebox in the city.
Yeah.
So I actually had a condo, a 1-bedroom condo when I went up there. I was living large, but it was different for Tony, and he had all these children, very young.
Yeah.
And he had to, pick them all up and move them to this place which was really incredibly expensive compared to what, he was used to.
Oh yeah.
So there were other outside influences, but he, in the short time that he was there, I thought he did great stuff, and I think that if he would have stuck around, he would have been along the lines of what Jim Ross was able to accomplish in the WWE.
Yeah,
I mean, he's a great announcer. I mean, he was really good. I like his play-by-play.
I did too. He was very passionate too, and growing up as a fan, you could tell he loved wrestling.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate.
Too. I mean, we had a lot of fun together.
I've had the chance to speak with him a few months ago, and he really is a cool dude. I don't want to take too much more of your time, but I do want to ask you, I know I'm sure everybody asks you about the event center, but how many hours a day or a week did you put into the event center? I mean, it had to be grueling at some point.
Oh yeah, it was one of those things. I remember thinking at times that, imagine you get to do this unbelievably great job, and then it tortures you.
Right.
And that's, there were some weeks there, man, I would lose my voice a couple of times a year. I mean, completely. Basically, I couldn't talk.
Yeah.
And I think to this day, it's why my voice is the way it is that the training that I had for those hours of sitting in that chair. But literally, it would take pretty much 4 days of the week, solid, 8 hours a day.
Yeah.
And where we would do the markets. And at one point, they were doing 90 plus something markets. And remember, I was doing, we do 3 hits a show.
Yep.
And it would have, each of those 3 hits would have an open, a bridge, and a close.
Right.
And every one of those, I would pretty much, I can't remember if I went through the card on every one of them, but I'd have to read the entire card, throw it to an interview, have a reaction, throw it back to another interview, and then do another pitch at the end of when you're going to be able to see this and what, And that was hard enough. But it never failed that you get towards the end of the week, and I'm 60, 70 markets in, and I had a red phone on the desk, and Howard Finkel was in charge of keeping track of all the markets and the promos that we did.
Right.
And that phone would blink and have a red light on it. And whenever it blinked, that meant somebody did something, somebody got hurt, something got changed in the card, and that meant I was going to have to go back and change markets.
Oh man,
and that was when I'd see that thing blink. And I'd get in. Yeah. Hey, Howard.
Yeah.
Hello, Sean. The Berserker broke his leg last night. You're gonna have to redo 14 more. And I'd be like, okay. Now, folks, that didn't just mean you go in and just change the Berserker,
right?
Because remember, every one of those hits I did had 18 wrestlers or whatever on the card. We would pitch, say, 5 or 6 matches, but still I'd have to go back and do every single one of those marks. Remember, I customized them. I told you to be at the Rosemont Horizon this Friday night at 7:30 p.m. So you'd have to go back in and do every single one of those bridges, and that might involve, because we would do them as weeks too. We'd start, say, I don't know, 3 or 4 weeks out. And then I would say 3 weeks from tonight, or 3 weeks from Friday, 2 weeks from. So I would have to go in and redo every one of them.
Man.
So it was brutal. And I tell the story that at one point, it probably wasn't the first time it happened, but they would roll. They would just keep rolling, and all they did, we had the teleprompter, but all they would do with that is they had a camera on the teleprompter, and they would just paste the card up on a legal size sheet of paper. Right. So I could look into the camera and I could just run the match down. Everything else I said was ad-libbed. But they were rolling tape, and there was one point where it probably been a particularly tough week, and the phone blinked. And you see me on camera, somebody saved this, and you see me go, really? Okay, yep, Howard, got it, thanks a lot. You can see me off camera. I hang the phone up, and then you see me take the phone and I throw it across the stage.
Oh wow!
And I stand up and walk out. Oh man!
Oh, that's fantastic. I remember those quite well. And it wasn't just the local markets you're doing. You do the pay-per-view promos. You do the nationalized stuff for primetime. So I remember watching Superstars. I grew up in Connecticut. I grew up in Windsor, which is just north of Hartford. Every
Civic Center.
Yep, Civic Center. Every few months they come on and say, Sean Mooney, Event Center here. We're coming live. We're coming to you from Hartford in 2 weeks. And I'm like, all right, cool. And then you cut to a promo and all that. But then when I watch primetime, it'd be different. You'd be either doing a pay-per-view or just doing a generalized segment of whoever you guys probably want to get over at that time.
Right.
And it was completely different stuff. But so I don't think people even understand how much work you put into all that. Not only that, but doing the backstage interviews, for the pay-per-views or the Saturday Night's Main Events or the the pre-shows for all the pay-per-views. I mean, you put a lot of work in.
Yeah, and then you also did mention that this is when we were starting to go into the UK, and I did all the Sky Television. I did the same thing for Sky Television.
Oh, I wasn't aware of that. Okay.
So that we did our own version of the event center for them. Say at Wembley Stadium or Albert Hall, and Alfred and I would do stuff, but we do event centers for them.
Oh wow!
And it was quite a full schedule. It really was.
That's something I never knew. I learned something every day. Wow, you were Man, I'll give you credit. You hung in there. You were there from what, 88 to what?
88 to 93.
93? Yeah. Okay.
I wish I would have stuck around longer, though. I do. Looking back, but I had other opportunities,
yeah.
But it was a great part of my life. There's no question. I cherished those years there, and I like the fact that they still call me up once in a while, and get to be a part of it.
Yeah.
And the podcast is fun too. I'm having a good time with the podcast.
I thoroughly enjoy your podcast. I was thrilled to hear that you were coming back when you first came back with Hacksaw. I was like, Sean, yeah, how cool is it people still remember you? Even though you had a short run there, but you left such an impact on a lot of us fans. How cool is it that people still want to hear what you had to say?
Well, I'll tell you, that's a good point you brought up there, because when I was first approached about doing it, I was like, what? Why the hell would anybody want to hear from me? I did the event center.
Right.
Basically, I didn't understand it. And it took me a little while to really understand why people are still fascinated with that time. And and the reason is it's part of their childhood for many of them. They were kids growing up.
Yeah,
and it was a wonderful time. It was one of the best periods in the history of professional wrestling. And it's before life stresses came in, that you ended up getting, going to school, college or something, and getting out and starting a job and having to work and getting married and everything and having children. And that was a simple time. It was, I was you're a kid and get up Saturday mornings and go out in the living room and get a bowl of Lucky Charms and in honor of St. Patrick's Day, of course.
Right, of course.
But to and just watch wrestling and follow the storylines, and you had your favorites. Everybody had favorites, and I was part of that. I look at it. I had a small part on a great TV show that people watched when they were growing up, and I was one of those players. And when you see me, it brings back those memories, and to me that I'm honored. I'm honored by that, and it's really been fun. And I don't do many of those shows, but the ones I've been at, people have just been so awesome, and I'm overwhelmed by the response that people come over and want me to sign stuff. It's just really okay.
Awesome. Yeah, right. Yeah. It just shows.
I'm humbled by it. I really am.
That's good, and it shows the type of impact that you had on us. I was about 12, 13 around that time. So, wrestling for me was an escape from daily life. My parents had gotten divorced around that age, so I immediately gravitated towards wrestling because it just, for that hour or 2 hours or whatever it was, it took my mind off what was going on at that time.
Yeah.
And watching you guys every week, you guys became part of my family. And I don't think even, the boys don't even realize what kind of impact they have on people that, you're in my living room every single week. You are part of my family. And as I got older, with, I'd have tons and tons of VHS. I still have my old VHS tapes from the 80s. And my wife screams at me constantly to get rid of, it's on the network now. Get rid of all your stuff.
Right,
but
right.
I can't. I've been carrying it around for 30 years. That's my stuff. But, I've just been a huge fan. And no matter what's going on with the current product, I'm always going to be a fan because Vince and other promotions were so good back then at hooking kids, whether it be Hulk Hogan or Macho Man, these Andre the Giant, Ultimate Warrior, these larger than life guys. I mean, it's just it was amazing. It was one of the coolest things I've ever seen. It was almost like a circus, there's something for everybody. Yeah. So the fact that people still remember you is cool because ever since I've been 14, 15, I usually listen to wrestling at night to help me go to sleep at all, because it for whatever reason, even all the screaming and yelling and all going on, it still soothes me and calms me. But, it is. And I have old pay-per-views of you, doing the pre-show. So, I've been hearing your voice on a nightly basis for 20, 25 years. So, when I found that you're coming back on the scene, I was like, holy crap, Sean Mooney, he's getting back into wrestling. And I rather enjoyed your show with Hacksaw. And it's unfortunate that he had too much going on that he couldn't continue. But I thought you guys were very, very funny. I thought you guys had great chemistry together. I really enjoyed what you guys did, and I still enjoy what you do on your own. You still have a passion for it, even though you've been out of the business for a long time. Just bringing up these old memories, you can see that sparkle in your eye again. You get excited to talk to people you haven't talked to, in the past, or new people you get to talk to, and It's pretty cool to watch you go through this journey all over again.
Yeah, and I've really enjoyed it. Shameless plug, Primetime with Sean Mooney. I hope people will take the time to take a listen. We're up to almost 100 episodes now, which just blows me away to think that. Yeah. I mean, when I started this, I was thinking, geez, how the hell am I going to do this? Especially when Hacksaw left.
Yeah.
Say, how am I going to do this every week? And I figure, oh, well, I'll see if this guy will talk to me this week. Okay, he's going to come on. Okay, so what about next week? I mean, literally, it would be, Friday would come around. I'd be like, oh, crap. Because we have to drop it every Wednesday morning. I'm like, I better find somebody. Now it's gotten better. We've kind of lined people up and we've gotten better at doing it. But it's really been a lot of fun. I mean, surprisingly to me, even that it's been so great. And one of the things that I think that separates the podcast from a lot of other wrestling podcasts, because there are thousands of them now, is that first of all, I don't call them interviews. I call them conversations, because that's what they are. And the other thing is that that I believe that if it were another subject, even if it wasn't professional wrestling, you would enjoy listening to this podcast, because I'm fascinated by people's lives. Like I said, I've studied people over the years, why they're successful. I've picked up things along the way that I've modeled. But if you look at these people that are in professional wrestling, there's not really a tougher industry to make it in entertainment. I can't imagine anybody could tell me there is, or even just a business alone. Yep. Because you think about it, when you first tell somebody you want to become a professional wrestler, you can imagine the look on their faces in your family. I mean, that's something from the very beginning that they're going, what? And they've sacrificed so much along the way. And many of them come from really, really humble beginnings. They were told no probably millions of times along the way. And good Lord, things that they put up with to get there, making no money, going to these places all over the country, where maybe there'd be sometimes 25 people in the crowd, but they never stopped believing that they were going to make it, the ones who got there. And so every one of their stories to me is fascinating. They're tales of persistence. There's tales of passion, and that I think people can learn from all of them. That, there's a lot of people out there, as I mentioned before, that, people are going to tell you no all the time. They're good, no matter what you're going to do. Even people who love you, and maybe in many cases even more so, because they want to protect you. They don't want you to have this, disappointed life. Well, to me, that's part of the journey. I mean, if you don't have that, if you don't get knocked on your ass at least 50 times at some point, and the question is, will you get up, and where do you go from there? And I certainly have tales to tell of me that happening to me, but I don't feel any different than other people that were determined to get somewhere, and that should be you. And so anyway, that's the way I look at the podcast. In other ways, they're great stories. Not only do you get to hear about these great tales of professional wrestling and their journey, but their lives, and their lives are fascinating. Everyone, I can go down the list, and Rob, I go into these. I do a lot of preparation. I don't. The worst thing I think you can do is come on. People come on a podcast and they're not prepared, and you can tell. I mean, how many of you listen to? You can tell this guy doesn't know anything about this guy. He's fishing.
Well, exactly.
I'm not saying I haven't been in situations where I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. With a guy will take me off somewhere that I don't even know. What event was that? But I do my homework. I don't just go. Look at the bio somewhere. I try and find articles. I look at stuff that's on YouTube. I watch matches just to see what refresh my memory.
Right.
But the big part of it is that you go in there, that these guys have great stories to tell, one after another, and that we've had like somebody like Harry Smith, Davey Boy Smith's son.
Yep.
Well, he's trying to make it as a professional wrestler. He's doing very well. But man, I always wondered, what was it like growing up?
Mm-hmm.
The son of a superstar who was huge. And he lost him when he was 17 years old. That kid was 17 when his dad was gone.
Mm.
And so, we've had people on like that too. So anyway, the joy I get out of what I love the most about is just hearing their stories, their life tales. Not just about what they did as a professional wrestler. and they're inspiring tales.
They definitely are, and that segues into my final thought. We know about your career. We know the things you've done in the past. We've heard a lot of your stories about who you work with, but who is Sean Mooney the person? Like, what do you like to do outside of work? What are your favorite hobbies, for example?
Oh man. Well, I have 3 kids. I'm a very proud father. My kids have done really well. I've got one who's living in Boston, working for a college back there, and another daughter's about to graduate, and a son who's just starting his college career. And so they take up a lot of my life, but they're adults now.
Right.
I've always been really active as far as doing working out. I used to do quite a bit of cycling before the roads got really dangerous around here. So
right.
I do it, but not as much, and I stay off the road. I find good trails. And then I do kickboxing. I do that 3 times a week. Yeah, and I really love that because not that I like getting punched in the face. I don't do much sparring because
right.
if anything happens to my face, I'm not working. So
your money
the money is. Yeah. But it's a great workout, and I love it out here. I came back to Tucson, and I love living in the city. I grew up here. I was gone for a long time, like 20 years. But I have a huge family, and we're all really close. So I had 4 siblings, and there's a huge family, and then my wife's family too. So I have it pretty good, and I love the job that I do out here. I host a morning show and really in touch with the community. It gives me a chance to do a lot of stuff out here that the different charities we were involved in, the Heart Association. I have an organization called Doodads that I'm very passionate about. It's an organization where, for the most part, we give scholarships away to kids that either don't have or haven't had a positive role model in their lives, or have lost their fathers, or have been abandoned, and very much single mother homes. And because they're special kids. I grew up in that situation, and you either go one of 2 ways: either you blame the world and you're a victim, or they become overachievers. In many cases, I haven't done the exact statistics, but in my experience in meeting these kids along the way, that's what happens.
Yeah.
And I seek them out in these high schools. There's a few that I work with here, and I leave it up to the coaches and teachers and counselors and administrators, and say, select some children come from these circumstances, who not necessarily, I don't look for, you don't have to be a 4.0 student, but I look for kids that are, that are passionate, and they work incredibly hard, and they just want a chance. They want an opportunity to go further, and we help them get in school. So it's called doodads.org, and folks can check it out. But I'd love to grow it bigger. It's kind of my organization. So with everything else I got going on, but we have a golf tournament every year out here, and I raise a bunch of money, and I give scholarships away at the end of the school season. So that's awesome. Pretty much it. That's Mooney.
That's pretty cool. And I'm glad that you give back, like that. Not a lot of people do, but I didn't realize that you did that. So that was really cool learning about that. Well, I appreciate everything, Sean. I appreciate you taking time out to talk to me. I still have a million questions as a fan I'd love to ask, and maybe we can do this again sometime. But
do it again.
I can't thank you enough for coming on. What else would you like to plug? Where can we find you on social media? Tell everybody about your show, or anything you want to plug. I'll give you the floor.
All right, man. Well, I hope that folks will take the time not only to check out your great podcast, but how about check out Mooney's at Primetime with Sean Mooney. We're on all the platforms, iTunes, and of course Spotify, and all those, whatever your platform is that you like to listen to podcasts on. Just put in Primetime with Sean Mooney. Check it out. Like I said, we're almost to 100 episodes, so you can go through the library. If you don't want to even catch the current episode, you can go back and you'll find somebody that you want to hear from. And as I said, great stories, great life stories. Yeah. Also, we've got Patreon. You can go to, we'd love to have you. A great Patreon membership, lots of perks there. We'd love you to check that out. Just go to patreon.com/primetimemooney, That's or patreon.com/Primetime Mooney. And you can get in touch with me. We have our social media. It's all Instagram and Twitter is at Primetime Mooney. Real easy to remember. And you can email me at primetimemooney@gmail.com. Gmail.com. There you go. So that's about it.
Awesome. Great.
You got it all in.
Good. And it's hard to remember all that. And I forget some of the stuff I do every week too. But you guys, you can follow me at RadRob Gaming on Twitter. I also am an active gaming streamer. You can follow me on twitch.tv/RadRobGaming. And I have a YouTube channel with tons of videos tons of gaming videos. You guys want to check that out? Just search Rad Rob Gaming on YouTube, and it will be the first result that comes up. You can also email our show at radturtlespod@gmail.com, and our show Twitter's page is at radturtlespod. So there you go. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Sean, thanks again for coming on, buddy. I really appreciate it.
All right, Robin, we'll talk soon. I enjoyed it.
Thanks again for listening to the Rad Turtles Wrestling Podcast. Once again, you can follow us on Twitter. We are at radturtlespod, and you can email the show, and we will read it on air. Our email address is radturtleswrestling@gmail.com. Thanks for tuning in. We appreciate all of your support. You have been listening to the Rad Turtles Wrestling Podcast, only here on the Reality Check Podcast Network.